Welcome back to ESPN League Central, heading into round 23 of the NRL season. As always, joined by my co-host James Graham. What was your highlight of round 22?
Well, I'm not going to give you a highlight. I'm going to give you a low light, which was the Cowboys' performance against the Roosters. I had to commentate that game for radio. I was a bit lost for words, but also, as you can probably see, it's been burnt into my retina, and I'm still paying the price. What is it? Almost a week later, Guru.
Yeah, tough one there. We're going to get to the Cowboys very soon. Shane, what stood out to you from round 22?
Well, James stole my thunder with Roosters' performance, but I'd probably have the next one would be the Sharks. I think the Sharks are playing some really good football at the moment. At home last week, beautiful afternoon down there at Shark Park. They got the job done this week up against the Dragons.
It was a week of, the proper contenders in this competition really flexing their muscles this week. I think there was a bit of a separation this weekend. Let's talk a bit of State of Origin, boys. Obviously, the New South Wales Blues getting the job done this year. Wild how it all played out, but we got the shield. That's all that matters. Laurie Daley has stepped down in the last week or so. We've now had Matt King appointed as the head coach of the New South Wales Blues. James Graham, your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, congratulations to Matt King. He's certainly bided his time there in that assistant role for a number of years, but he's entering into the ultimate cauldron of pressure. Already Queensland journalists will be going through the rap sheet of Matt King to figure out what angle they can take to crowbar their way into a reaction. And look, you've got to say congratulations. I guess the lingering story that already people will forecast is, well, what about Ivan? But for now, Matt King's in the job and good luck to him.
Let's touch on Ivan very quickly. I mean, I sort of expected his name to be thrown up at this point. I thought there was a chance with Peter Wallace already in the building at Penrith. Maybe he would take over for an 8-week period like we used to see back in the day. Throw to you, Shane. Do you think there is a world where an interim coach could come in and do it, or are those days behind us?
I think they probably can, but there needs to be the right person. But, in relation to Ivan, I think there's enough noise out there that Ivan wants to go and travel and do a little bit. And whether he wants to jump out of the fire straight into another one being Origin, I'm not quite sure. So I think it's a great appointment from New South Wales perspective. King, he's been in that system he's been there with Madge, and now he's been there with Laurie. He's rugby league's Mr. Nice Guy. That's going to have to change. Unfortunately, he's going to have to pick some players. He's going to have to drop some players. The media will be into him. It's a high-pressure job. It'll be interesting to see how Matt King handles it.
The Brisbane Broncos this weekend, boys, if they lose, they find themselves in second last. The defending premiers, absolutely unprecedented. Jimmy, what has gone wrong here with the Brisbane Broncos season?
Well, before we answer what's gone wrong, let's look back at last year. They had that defeat against the Melbourne Storm in Melbourne. I think there was 2 or 3 injuries. And most people thought it was the end for them. And then they put on arguably the 7 best weeks of football, definitely the last 3 weeks of football that we are ever likely to see. Now, is that sustainable based off what we've seen from the Broncos? Is no. And maybe, just maybe, that has affected them how they played this year in their title defence, because subconsciously they know that they can go back to that level of performance. It's been achieved before, and we can achieve that level and sustain that level if and when we want 4, 7 or 8 weeks. But unfortunately, with time and with the vigorous nature of the NRL, just how hard it is, it's almost impossible to replicate. I think the Broncos, and they got away with it last year not being a consistent football side. They were up and down and in and around the sort of 6 mark. I think at round 22 last year, they were sitting 6th. Now, that's usually not where Premiership winners sit at that particular stage in the season. They're already cemented in the top 4. So maybe the Broncos, they didn't have a consistent approach, but it worked. And they're finding out the usual outcomes for an inconsistent approach to a football season this time around.
Shane, I look at the Brisbane Broncos, as we said, 1 more loss. They're in second last place. Payne Haas leaving at the end of the season, going to the South Sydney Rabbitohs. Does that close their premiership window for you, or are they still a proper contender next season?
Yeah, well, time will tell, but say they're going to be a proper contender with, probably the best front rower in the last 10 years leaving the club. I thought this year James explained really well about what happened last year on the back of Reece Walsh. I think this year, Adam Reynolds getting a year older. Last year he had a pretty good season. He was kicking a 40-20. His kicking was his infield kicking was outstanding. Ben Hunt had a pretty good season. Ben Hunt will be there. And the other one that I thought that they missed is Billy Walters. He did his ACL last year, missed the grand final, but they were in such a rare, especially their fullback, period of form that it got it through and brushed over the loss of Walters. Next year, well, they need to find another front row. I know from the Warriors is going there. Mitch Barnett is going there, but their bench at the moment, when those two front rows, they're playing big minutes. When they do go off, they're cooked. They need to cut their time down. They need to find a really good some interchange forwards. They need Billy Walters back. And then we talk about young halves. They're young halves that are coming through. 5, 6, 7 games under their belt. It's a little bit different when then you got Adam Reynolds and Ben Hunt. 600 games between them.
I get you, fine, but I think with that roster, any coach would be envious of the players that they've got. We spoke about Reece Walsh. Yeah. 24 with his best years ahead of him. They do lose Payne Haas, but in comes Barnett. And you've also got a player by the name of Xavier Wilson, who I think and believe is the best young forward in the game right now. You've got Katoni Staggs in the centre position. You've got Patrick Carrigan, a born leader. You've got Ezra Mam in at the 5'8" position, which we're yet to see the best of. We've seen glimpses of him. Any team with that level of talent, and I use the word specifically talent, should be competing for top 4 without a doubt. And any coach with NRL experience in the NRL would love that opportunity.
I agree with you, James, but I've looked at that side before and I said I would love to coach that side. But there's something missing there at the moment because they're not performing that way. They're not winning football games at the moment. They have a week on, a week off. As I said, I think their interchange bench is poor. Their 2 edge-back rowers have been okay. And you talk about they've got these stars scattered through their team. Ezra Mam, last year he was very good. I haven't seen that this year. He's had moments, but I think all those big names at Brisbane Broncos have had moments, but not consistently and not as a group.
Well, I spoke about the inconsistent approach and how they always knew they had it within them last year. And they've known they had it within them this year, but inconsistency. That game against Penrith a couple of weeks ago, that was the Broncos at the back end of last season.
Yes.
But it's so hard to replicate.
Can I take it a step further, boys? In hindsight, well, the signs there from the start. They won that premiership. A few weeks later, Payne Haas decides to leave. Now, I look at that situation and go, Payne Haas just won a comp with this side. He's with a coach that he just won a comp with. He's with a coach he just won an Origin series. He's with a coach that's got the best out of him on every single big stage. And on the honeymoon, he went, I'm out.
Guru, I think it started before that. They won the competition, and great. They haven't won a competition for a long period of time and celebrate it, enjoy that off-season. But they went to the UK to play in the Challenge Cup final.
World Club Challenge.
And they got pumped.
Yep.
They got pumped. And that should have been ringing alarm bells back then because on paper, they should have gone over and really did a job on that UK side, but they didn't. Hull KR.
Yeah, that's right.
Hull KR, and they didn't. Hull KR had an outstanding season, but I thought for sure that would have been the year that we'd go over there and put on a really good performance, but it didn't happen.
Yeah, look, in regards to Payne Haas leaving, and like you say, you've spoken about all the positive aspects that should have secured his signing. Let's not also forget what he's been through with that club in terms of winning a wooden spoon and staying, asking for a release and staying. And then when everything appears to be trending in the right direction, and they had the money to keep him, it's not a financial issue. It's not a Penrith Panthers, Jerome Luai, Viliami Kikau, Stephen Crichton situation where, they look at the books and go, we just can't make it work. Sorry, Payne. You're going to have to go elsewhere and you go and get the best deal possible for you and your family. The Broncos wanted him to stay.
The other elephant in the room for me, boys, Michael Maguire has a history. When you look through the clubs he's been at, South Sydney, won a premiership, really struggled after that. He's been incredibly successful, whether it be with New Zealand, New South Wales in short format competitions. Is he the guy moving forward for Brisbane? My fear is that they could lose more players if they side with Madge over some of these players.
Yeah, well, I'll answer that one first up. I just find it amazing that a coach, of course, if he's been a hard taskmaster and a high-performance coach that wants to win and understands Craig Bellamy gets his teams fit as a fiddle. Madge Maguire gets his teams fit as a fiddle. You just need to be fit in this industry, and he trains them. He rides them hard, but he's got success from. You don't win. The things that Madge has won as a head coach without hard work, knowledge, and that's his approach. Sometimes it's not about the tactical and the technical side. It's about being fitter and stronger than the opposition, physically and mentally. And I think it's a great thing, and that's the way he is, and he's not going to change, we know that. But if you go to that club, you've got to understand that you've got to have to train hard and work really hard because that's the style of the coach.
Well, I think every club and every coach trains their players hard. It's often what breaks a player is the psychological burden and the things in and around training, and I'm not saying that this happens with Michael Maguire, but constant man management, constant wanting to know, over-analytical approach of, here's all your video, and I want to know that you've watched all that video. And it's not a physical problem because you only have the genetic capability to train hard for a certain amount of time before the body would just break down. It's often the mental overload. And you mentioned that trip to the UK. That was post an intense army-style camp. And sometimes those sorts of approach, when you're already going away to England, and maybe it's a compromise there, and you go, do we need an army camp for 10 days or a week when we're going away for 10 days to England? Like, yeah, you're going to get your fundamentals in, but what's the psychological effect on the playing group? Are they going to be offside? Are they going to start questioning me as a coach? There's, the modern day athlete, and look, I know there's people out there that would say they give anything to be in that position, but once you're in that position, things change, and the cultural norm changes. And players would have been in Australia camp, and talked about the rigmarole of pre-season. A lot of those star players were over there for Maguire as well, playing in an Ashes series in October and November. They come back, then they're in the army camp, then they're going back to England. Maybe they're just looking at it going, is this what was needed?
Hold on, as a fan, can you explain that a little bit more? What actually changes? Like after you win that comp, what changes? What do you mean by that?
Well, I can't come from a position of winning a competition here, but what you expect, and I sort of experienced this with Hasler, where we peaked in 12 and 14 and made grand finals very, very close, and then the level of intensity in the training workload was still the same, and maybe some players needed to be dialed down. And if you look at Coach Bellamy, it'd be really interested to see how he's changed over time with a different generation of players as well. I know the tactics have changed, but I think sometimes the same message can get tiring with those players, especially once they've become successful. Success changes you. Penrith have booked the trend in terms of motivation. They've booked the trend. But let's go back before that. All teams that won premierships naturally have a drop-off in motivation. Now, maybe Madge looked at that and said, well, I'm going to change that usual trend and go harder than we went last year. Maybe. But they're paying the price for whatever happened this year.
Well, a little bit on what James is talking about. When we won in 16, when we went to the UK in 17, it was really hard to get my players to focus on the job in hand, the world.
But would you have done an army camp?
No, I wouldn't have done an army camp.
Or taken the lads away from their base?
No, I wouldn't have done that.
Because you knew that what was coming was going to involve pressure from home around why you're away.
Yeah, definitely. And it was more of, in 17 when we went over, it was more of this is the reward for winning the competition. If we win it, great. And they tried really hard, but there was always that little sense of we've won it in 16, this is a reward to go to the UK and see if we can win the other one. The intensity just wasn't there. A little bit on also what James was talking about with players. Within a squad of 30 players, you'll have 10. This is just rough numbers. You'll have at least 10 that live, eat and breathe rugby league. I could send them videos at night. I could text them while the game's on at 7:30 or 8 o'clock at night, maybe 10 o'clock at night, and they will reply straight back to, they are footy fanatics. And then you got some other blokes, as soon as they walk out of that facility, they don't want to hear about football. They don't want to talk about it. And that's not wrong. That's not. We shouldn't judge those players that do that. That's just their way. And there have been some elite players like that, really elite players. Train really hard, do what I need to do at training. But when I walk out of that facility, it's over. It's over. And there's some others that will be 24/7.
Let's go from the bottom of the ladder to the very top. The Penrith Panthers, they made a huge decision last week. Blaise Talagi dropped from the side. Jack Cogger comes in at 5'8". He remains there this week. They have got 2 huge games incoming, the Penrith Panthers, the New Zealand Warriors into the Roosters clash. Personally, boys, I think if Jack Cogger wins those 2 games, it's his jersey for the rest of the season. Thoughts, Jimmy?
Yeah, I'm with you, mate. That's it. They knew what they were doing, the Panthers. Not many teams in this situation would even consider tinkering with their spine. I mean, look what it's done. But obviously, maybe a defensive issue there in and around Blaise Talagi. And Cleary's gone and decided to change that, knowing full well that he's putting him up in he had almost a dress rehearsal last week against the Raiders. Look, no disrespect to them, but they're not the team that they were last year. But then the big test is these next 2 games, because he knows he's going to face these 2 teams, or one of these 2 teams, in the run to the Premiership for this year. So he's testing it now to see if it works. I'm with you. If they get the 2 Ws, they don't change again.
Flano, how do you see this one playing out with the Penrith Panthers halves?
I loved Cogger last week. He had an all-round fantastic game. His kicking game was great. His defence was great. The next couple of weeks, as you said, will be the problem that I have is with Ivan. He would not change this late in the season that if just for the sake of changing to try and get something out of Blaise. He's made a change because he probably feels that, hey, we're going into the semi-final series and I need my best team out there, and I'm undecided at the moment what my best team looks like. Cogger's just got to do what he did on the weekend for another couple of weeks, and I don't think we'll see Blaise, in this season. The main part of the season, semi-finals, injuries, suspension, all those type of things have got to come into play. But young Cogger has got it all in front of him at the moment, and the way he played on the weekend, first class.
Boys, another team that's fighting for a spot in the top 8 is the North Queensland Cowboys. I'd argue last weekend might have been the worst weekend in club history, 82-10 against the Sydney Roosters. From a fan's perspective, I want to get an understanding from a key player, a head coach. When you're involved in a drumming like that, what does it look like? What are the conversations behind the sticks at 68-10 or whatever it was, Jimmy? What does that actually look like for players?
There is no conversation. Everything that could have been said, should have been said, has gone. It is eerily silent. It was at home as well. I can't imagine what was going through those players' minds. It looked like they were trying, at times, trying really hard, but as individuals, which made their defence even worse. And it's not a good lesson to have. The harder you try, the worse it gets. But when you're not trying together, that's what happens. And where they go from here, 2 key players, 2 senior players weren't involved in that performance. That was Tommy Dearden and Reid Marnie, 2 spine members. It'd be interesting to hear Flano's thoughts on how much Todd Payton goes to those 2 for advice, because
well, Tommy's not back for it yet for a couple of weeks.
But you go and speak to him about what do the group need from this? Because I've seen coaches, for accountability purposes, you would do a watch along of the entire 80 minutes. Please explain. And the 80 minutes, the video would go for about 3 hours because there's so much of like, well, that's me and I didn't do this, or that you could go the other way and say, Magic Round, we beat that club and we had 12 players for 60 minutes due to the fact that 2 of ours were sin-binned. And we've defended our way to victory. Do you get the strength or the head of performance to come in and maybe take accountability and say, look, I got that wrong. We played the Broncos 5 days ago. We got it wrong. And maybe get the players to believe that. It's I think the most important thing is Todd Payton figuring out what the players need from that embarrassing performance.
I'll put you in Todd Payton's shoes, Shane.
Yep.
What would the next week look like for you?
Yeah, well, the performance against the Broncos was outstanding. They went out there with purpose. Their defence was switched on. That was a big win for them. And then we had a 5-day turnaround. So the questions I think Todd would be asking is, did we get it wrong that post 5 days? Did they go out after the game against the Broncos? They're all questions that got to be asked. How was our prep into this next day? 5-day turnaround. Did we put too much emphasis on being 5 days? In 5 days, you don't put in a performance like you did against the Broncos and then put in that against the Roosters. You do not all of a sudden come out with intent and attitude defensively and then basically have none in 5 days. So something's gone wrong that week. What is it? Is it the preparation? Is it the mentality of the week? Have they celebrated too long? Have they thought about, hey, we did a really good job against the Broncos and then haven't started preparing for the Roosters? Because that's the mentality of the group leading into it. I wouldn't have worried about watching any video. James, some players might go off and watch some individual video. As a group, as a coach, you're not going to get much out of that. He had to sit through it. Game day, to watch it again would be horrendous. I agree with James about what's going on behind the try line. Players go into this self-protect mode that, hey, I can't change the scoreboard there, but I'm going to make sure that I don't look too bad here. So then you always start going and worrying about your space and doing your job. And that's a big problem straight away. So when you get into that situation, you've got to sort of look a little bit longer about, next set, next 5 minutes. Let's just make sure we get to half time. We complete our next set. We kick long and chase. You need to break it down a little bit. But obviously, Todd Payton would have had to go into that week and say, where did we get it wrong? And I think most of it is in between the ears, a lot of those players, because they weren't mentally prepared for it.
Maybe they were over-emotional in the Broncos game as well.
Possibly.
And learning that, if they have an emotional game like they did against the Broncos in a finals game, they're going to review their processes. Because let's not forget, Todd Payton said, nobody likes Brisbane outside of Brisbane. Yep. And if you go back and watch the way that they started, they flew out the blocks against the Broncos. It was an emotional performance. They also knocked the Broncos out of any hope of playing finals. So there could be that sense of a celebratory mood. And they were unprepared for the Roosters. I said a few things like, what do the group need? But how do we make sure this doesn't happen again? And maybe there's some recognition from the staff in and around the week, but also it was from the very first set.
Yep.
Reece Robson jumped from dummy half and made about 15, 20 metres from the very first set. Now, maybe they go back and review that, and maybe there wasn't enough of an emphasis put on the fact that their first set was so poor, and maybe there's something there that the coach can recognise, a few key a call, for example, to resonate through the group, resonate through the senior players. Hey, this is going to happen again. Let's make sure it doesn't.
Yeah, but if you win a game, James, and it would have happened many times in your career, you have a great performance, and whether it's 5 or 6 or 7 days to your next game, you do review it, but then you've got to wipe that and move on and start mentally.
You should.
NRL level, you should. Just because we tackled well last week doesn't mean we're going to tackle well this week. You need to start that process on the training field, but also mentally. Like, you play a big game, you have the downside of it, then you need to bring yourself back up mentally, because it's a tough game and you need to mentally prepare for it, which you did. And
Jeez, it was a roller coaster, Flana.
But that's what I'm saying.
Oh my goodness me.
If you didn't prepare for it, if you just thought what I did last week against the Broncos is going to get me through this week, you're in trouble. So it's a tough job, but they need to look at it because if it happens again, whew, wow.
All right, boys, let's get stuck into the round 23 preview. A huge weekend of footy coming our way. We kick off on Thursday night with the Titans hosting the North Queensland Cowboys. Shane, what are your tips for this one?
A nervous Todd Payton. He will be, as Jimmy said, very, very nervous. And if he has another performance like they did last week, look out. But the Titans were disappointing last week. I have no idea. I'll go the home side.
You're going to go the home side. I think the Cowboys simply just have to bounce back. One thing is a guarantee. They can't play as bad as they did last week. It's a Thursday night game as well. I think the Cowboys, they not delete that from the memory, but they use it as a way to inspire a much better performance. They're going places, the Cowboys. They're still in the fight for the 8. It's a simple must-win game. They've got a favourable back end of the season now. It's time to get serious for the Cowboys.
I'll take the Cowboys to bounce back in this one. We've then got the New Zealand Warriors hosting the Penrith Panthers, the early game on Thursday. Game of the week for me. Jimmy, I've got the Panthers winning this one. How are you seeing it?
Yeah, I'm with you. Huge 2 weeks for the Penrith Panthers. They play 2 of their top 4 rivals. It begins with the Warriors. This is a huge test of the packs of both of these teams. They will both be feeling as though they've got the best packs in the comp. I think Penrith definitely do have the best defensive pack in the comp, led by their system. But that's where the game could be won from a Warriors perspective. I think that their pack, if they can muscle up, obviously James Fisher-Harris, maybe Leka Halasima, some of his dangerous runs as well. Noah Edwards as well. So a big out for the Penrith Panthers, but I still think they get the win.
I've already been to the bottle shop, got my little 6-pack in the ice, ready to go for this one. Can't wait. The Warriors were pretty disappointing prior to the game last week against the Titans. Hit some form there. At home, going to be hard to beat, but I cannot back against the Panthers. I just have to stick with them. They're professional, a really good footy team.
Rounding out a cracking Friday night of football, we've then got the Roosters taking on the Bulldogs. Satili Tupanua back in for the Bulldogs. Jimmy, a huge one.
Yes, arguably the Bulldogs' best forward of the year. Mentioned about Viliami Kikau and Jacob Preston on the edge. He brings so much to that side. And a big task coming up against the Roosters. It would have been a strange week for the Sydney Roosters after we've spoken about it previously. I'm obviously going to back the Dogs to go all the way in this one.
I didn't think anything else that James would go against the Bulldogs. I agree with him. It's going to be an interesting week for the Roosters because, they had a training run last week, but a big game, momentum. I'm going to go with the Bulldogs with James Graham.
Oh, yes, Flana. Welcome aboard. How good's that?
In a shocking sign for the Bulldogs, I'm on board too.
Oh, yes, the
Instant
trifecta.
curry, I think. Let's talk about Saturday. We kick off in Perth, boys. We've got the Melbourne Storm taking on the Manly Seagulls. The Seagulls coming off a bye. Shane, who you got here?
The Storm was so brave last week, a side that, ran out there that looked nothing like a Melbourne Storm side from the start of the year. 5 or 6 players there that we had to look in the program to see their names, making their debuts, 5 or 6 games under their belt. They did an outstanding job. Manly Seagulls have got to win. They've just got to win. If they don't win, their season's over, and I'm going to stick with the Eagles.
You know what, funny? You've just brought me back to my playing career. I hated playing against the unknowns. Hated it. It was an awful experience. But on this game, Manly a bye couldn't have come at a better time. Mm-hmm. It really couldn't. They had that sugar hit of Fosball. Obviously, it dwindled a little bit, the Tommy Taburovic injury, and they're fighting for their season. And I think that Manly go over to Perth, get the victory, and are reinvigorated after the bye.
Yeah, I've got Fosball in a tight one over in the West. We've then got the Battle of Brisbane, the main game, or the 5:30 game on Saturday. Dolphins v Broncos. Jimmy, who have you got here?
Oh, the Dolphins all the way. I think they're the smoky for this year. I think they're the team from outside the top 4 that can really cause some damage, but they need to get winning. They'll be aiming for the top 4 as well. It'll be a huge win for them to come up against the Broncos to really rub some salt into the wound of the Brisbane Broncos. They'll be cheering their way on to September, the Dolphins, the Broncos, not so much. Let the Dolphins let them know.
Yeah, I'm going the Dolphins. I didn't think they were that good last week against the Dragons, but I think they just got too many points in them. They'd love to play Big Brother when the Big Brother's down the bottom and they're a little bit further up the top. So too much to play for. I'm going for the Dolphins.
Yeah, Fins up on Saturday for me. We've then got the late game, Rabbitohs v Eels. I think all the troops coming back for South Sydney, I think they'll be too good for Parramatta. What are your thoughts, Shane?
Well, they're the same boat. They've just got to keep winning, the Rabbitohs. So they get a few troops back, as you said, but... Parramatta have been one of those sides for me that they've tried every week. They haven't been clinical, they haven't been sharp, but they definitely have a go. Last week's game was an absolute stinker against West Tigers, and I'm sure this weekend, Jason Riles will have his side well prepared, but the Rabbitohs, they've just got to win. They've just got to keep in touch, and with some good players coming back, they should get it done.
On the Eels, have you ever seen a team play so badly but win?
It's the worst performance to win a game ever, I think.
Yes, and they can't play like that again against any of the other teams in the NRL. South Sydney, with everybody back, they know the level of importance. Wayne Bennett won't let this one slip through their keeper.
Raiders v Knights on Sunday afternoon. I'm going to take the Newcastle Knights in this one. Jimmy, what do you got?
Yeah, first off, congratulations to Tyson Frizzell, former teammate of mine, on his 300th NRL game. I think, look, it's a tough task to go to the Raiders. They're still a good football side. They come away from Mudgee with their tail between their legs, but they fight for everything. I'm looking forward to this contest, but I think the Knights will have just too much and too much motivation.
The door slightly open for the Raiders. Ricky Stewart at home. He'll have one last shot at the stumps. I'm going for the Raiders.
We round out round 23 with a Shane Flanagan Cup here. The Dragons v the Sharkies. Flano, I don't know if I can go past the Sharkies in this one. How do you see it playing out?
I'm going to go reverse psychology this week. I'm going to go for the Sharks. It's not at home, but it's a 4 o'clock game on Sunday. They've been pretty sharp in the daytime. The Sharks, Nico Hines and Trindle going good. The Dragons not playing that bad, but I'm going to, as I said, I'm just going to do a little bit of reverse psychology and go for the Sharks.
So you want the Dragons to win?
Correct.
And that to be the outcome. Okay, because I was confused. I've been in some psychology classes and I don't know what I'm talking about. The doc doesn't know, and I just needed to clarify.
Why you went to those classes, James?
Oh no, it's a one-on-one session.
Sorry.
I can't see a world in which the Dragons don't win.
I don't
Sorry,
know.
the Sharks don't win.
Yeah.
Look what you've done to me, Flana. Well, you've confused me. Look, I've written this one winner: Sharks.
This game last year, I don't know if you remember it. It was at Cogra. Similar time, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and the Dragons beat the Sharks. And a very similar situation. The Dragons down the bottom, the Sharks trying to get into the 8. Local derby, it's always the case. When you think someone's up here and down there, you think the result might either go that way. It doesn't go that way.
Boys, I don't know how we do it every single week, but the show just goes to another level week in, week out. Thank you for joining us once again here on ESPN League Central. We'll be back next week, same time here on Disney+.